Okay, our last video in this series will be cell walls. Okay, let's talk about cell walls as an organelle. All right, they are non-living, so it's definitely maintained by the cell, but it doesn't really have a metabolism or much going on. It's just a cellulose layer around some types of cells. Now, where do you find these? Okay. Um, they are in plants where they are mainly cellulose. They are also in prokaryotes and fungi. Okay. So bacteria have cell walls. That's a common, what kind of cells have cell walls? Most people will say just plants, but bacteria also have cell walls. Fungi have them. So the mushrooms you eat on your pizza, you're eating cell walls. Big difference. They're not cellulose. Fungi cell walls are made out of some chitin and some other substances, but chitin is also what insect shells are made out of. So it's kind of weird that when you eat a mushroom, you're eating the same thing that a wasp's exoskeleton is made out of, or a beetle. All right, some protists have them. Those are those single-celled guys. So some, not all. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more. We'll start with plants. So plants have a primary and secondary cell wall. Okay, so the primary and secondary cell wall. So it's sort of a double structure. We're going to look at a picture of it here in a second. So instead of me drawing it and showing it to you again, let's just look at the picture I've included. Okay, so the primary wall is sort of here on the outside. If you want to draw a set of primary walls, that'd be great. There's two primary walls, okay? Then we have layers of secondary wall. So you have primary and secondary wall. This is where the inside of the cell is, right here. Okay, I'm just going to draw a nucleus there to kind of, oh, that's the cell. So that's what we mean by primary and secondary. Now, when you zoom in on these, they have these little passageways between them called plasmodesma. And I always want to say plasmodesmata. I want to put like a second D in there. So watch my pronunciation on that and challenge me when I say it wrong. So that allows substances to move from cell to cell. Now, we have to be careful with this because cells are supposed to be closed containers that keep chemical reactions in and maybe other things out. So when we open up passageways between them, that gives us also some risk we'll talk about. So the primary wall is the thinner one, and it has a lot of flexibility. And you'll see sort of a grid, and that grid will be at right angles. The fibers will be that way, and that allows that to sort of stretch in and out, Because plant cells, as they lose and gain water, they have a lot of movement as far as flexing in and out. All right. As I said back in the microtubule section, the placement of these fibers is affected by that. All right, let's talk about the secondary wall. You got everything you need there? Okay. Your secondary wall is much more thick, and it doesn't have as much flex. It's more rigid. It's laid down in different laminated layers. So I think lamina means a book page or something like that, like a laminated floor. Okay, so you'll see this laid down in layers, and the cell membrane, this is the cell membrane, and then the cell wall will be out here. Okay, and that'll be that sort of 90-degree cell wall. It's yellow. Okay, so your cell wall's yellow, your layers are the blue, and the cell membrane, so this is the actual cell in here, and your secondary wall is, your secondary wall is the blue stuff here. All right. I need to find a way to erase this all very quickly. It's probably out there, but I haven't figured it out yet. So, you may not see this on every part of the cell. It may spiral around it in certain areas. Secondary walls are what wood's made out of, so after the cell dies, the secondary wall remains, and so furniture, wood, whatever. So if this is a set of cells, and this is the cell wall that's left over, in wood, water can kind of be absorbed and given off by wood, and sometimes in your house in the winter, the wood will shrink, and then when moisture returns in the spring, it will expand. Or if you have an area where there's lots of moisture in your house, it'll take up the water, and the wood will swell, and it can crack and things like that. So when we're furniture makers, a lot of times, we'll do things to the wood to seal it, to keep that water from changing the wood and ruining the furniture. All right. There is a middle lamina, which just means layer. And I'll try to keep the same. There's my primary, secondary, and that middle lamina is right here, and it has a substance called pectin in it, and that's used in to make jellies and jams, and it's kind of like a glue that holds things together. So it holds these cells together, but you can go to the grocery store and buy pectin if you want to make homemade jelly or something like that, and that will give your jelly a little bit more sticking together. We don't want to just make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and dump out like liquid goo. Jelly needs to hold together and be spreadable. That way it doesn't fall out of your sandwich. All right, so it is a glue, like I just said. All right, a little bit more about cell walls. They're not always made out of cellulose. They can be made out of a couple other materials, but that's not as common. And so those are polysaccharides, which are carbs, just like cellulose. But they can also have silica in them, which is a mineral that has silicon in it. And again, this is the cell skeleton that holds it together and gives it shape, especially in plants. Okay. For animal cells, this is something that we really don't necessarily consider an organelle, but I'm going to go over it really quick. Some animal cells have sort of a fuzzy layer on the outside made up of some different materials. And this fuzzy layer holds the cells together. Now, in tissues, there's a type of tissue called a connective tissue that has a matrix, and that's a non-living part of the tissue that gives structure. This is sort of the same thing, but on a cellular level. And just like that pectin glues plant cells together, this glues your cells together. It's made up of collagen and glycoproteins, okay? We're going to look at a picture of it. And a lot of experiments are saying that this is part of cell behavior and cell communication. In other words, let's look at the picture. When certain substances interact with this material, it's going to change the behavior of the cell. So your cell is going to pick up signals through this extracellular matrix, or possibly give them off. Okay, there are also little communication portals between cells. So we're going to look at the different types of those. Cells need to pass things back and forth. These are plant cells that are doing it. In plants, they're called plasmodesmata, like we said. Let's take a look at these. There are little holes that go between the cells. So if this is a cell and this is a cell, there'll be a little pipe between them. Okay? Now, when we say communication, we usually mean material passing through. That could be signals, but a lot of times it's nutrients and water. Now, one weakness that we talked about, when you let cells communicate with each other, you can get them infected very, very quickly. Plants can have viruses too. And if this cell gets a virus, it multiplies inside of that cell. And then it's small enough to work over into this cell. Takes over this cell, and you can wreck a plant pretty quick because the virus can move through these, okay? We don't usually think of things moving around in plants like they do in humans through the bloodstream, but they can. All right, in animals, we have a couple different ways this can happen. Okay, we have those plasmodesmata in plants, but in animals, we have a few other things. All right, here is a diagram that shows them all at the same time. Let me break it down for you one at a time. Okay, one at a time. You've got these desmosomes, you've got channels, and you have tight junctions. Okay? Let's look at them. Tight junctions. These are where the membranes of two cells, say this cell and this cell, are very tightly fused together. So they'll be held together. And this will seal off the area between cells. So what that means is something can't go from here to here. Where would this be important? Okay? If you want to keep something out, like your skin or your blood vessels, you don't want things leaking through there. So you get those cells really tightly together. It's because we don't want anything to leak through them. Your lungs. You don't want air to leak out of there. All right. So that's what I just told you. It stops things from moving around cells. And here's kind of a picture of that. They're kind of stitched together, tight junctions. Okay, tight junctions. Desmosomes. These are kind of like double-ended bushes that hold cells together, but it allows things to pass through. So these ones hold them together, but let things slip through. All right, let's take a look here. So you have like this thing that kind of looks like a bush in both sides of the cell, but things can slip through here. Now you're kind of like, well, how does it get around that? Well, remember, this is three-dimensional, so it just goes around, okay? So that will allow things to pass through. Gap junctions. These are open channels like the ones the plants have, okay? And again, allows communications. So these are little tubes that allow things to pass back and forth. Okay. We're done with this section on organelles. The big thing you want to know is, why did life evolve to be cellular? Why is everything in every living thing in tiny little bags? Okay? Well, you did a lab on cell size, and we talked a lot about that, so that should help you out there. So you need to be able to answer that question. We went through multiple videos of cellular parts and functions. So structure and function. Structure and function. That's going to be your key. Can you tell me the structure? Can you tell me the function?